Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
This is an update to a story I did very recently, and a whole bunch of people sent it to me. And I told you the story about the guy who spent a lot of time in prison, and then later on, recently, it was shown that he was innocent. In fact, the court ruled that he was innocent. Not that he was simply not guilty, but that he was actual innocent. Okay, that's the phrase they use, actual innocence, right? And so he was set to be released, and at the last second, they stopped that process because somebody higher up in the government thought that there should be some more delays here. Guy's only spent 30 some odd years in prison, but let's delay it a little more. And it appears to me, and I think you're going to agree with this, that the delay was entirely done for political reasons. That is somebody's grandstanding. Somebody wants some publicity. Somebody wants to be able to say, hey, look, I'm tough on crime. I'm trying to keep the bad guys in jail while everybody else is letting them go. Never mind the fact that this guy is actually innocent. So here's the update. Missouri man is free from prison after a judge overturned his 1991 conviction, despite the Attorney General's efforts to keep him there. Jim Salter and Heather Hollingsworth wrote this to the Associated Press. The man was freed from prison just a couple days ago after the Attorney General failed to keep him there. I never gave up because my family never gave up, he said, from the steps of the downtown St. Louis courthouse. It's easy to give up in prison when you lose hope. But when the system throws you away, you have to ask yourself if you wanted to just settle for it or fight for it. He's 52 years old now. He's been reunited with his wife as he was officially released from the St. Louis City Jail Tuesday night. As his release drew imminent, he was driven by van from the state prison to St. Louis, about 140 miles away. A St. Louis circuit judge had overturned the murder conviction and ordered his immediate release. But the man remained in prison amid a chaotic process that began when the Attorney General of Missouri appealed to try and keep the man locked up. When asked about the delay, the man in jail said it was testing. To hear the decision by the judge and then be prepared to leave on Wednesday, only be brought back to prison, it was torture. So his release marks the second time in recent weeks that a person was freed from prison, despite the AG's appeals to keep them in custody after the murder convictions were overturned. The other story is about Sandra Hemme, who was freed in July from a Western Missouri prison after serving 43 years for a murder that a judge deemed there was evidence of her actual innocence. So the office of the AG also opposed that release while an appellate court reviewed the case. She walked out of the prison only after a judge threatened the AG with contempt if she wasn't freed. Now, people who study these things say that they think the AG was taking a tough stance to shore up votes in advance of a contested primary. He faces a challenge from an attorney in August. So at one point last week, the man was minutes away from getting out of prison after the circuit judge threatened a warden with contempt if he wasn't released. But then the Missouri Supreme Court agreed to consider the case, temporarily halting his freedom. Luckily, they didn't sit on this for a year and a half like they sometimes do. Then on Tuesday, the state's highest court issued a ruling stating the St. Louis Circuit Court attorney needed to confirm it had no plans to retry the man before he could be freed. So the circuit attorney immediately filed a memorandum with the court stating he would not seek a new trial, setting in motion the process towards the man's freedom. And a statement from the Midwest Innocence Project said the man is coming home. We are thrilled that he'll finally be reunited with his family after 34 years behind bars for a crime he did not commit. We look forward to supporting him as he rebuilds his life. And so this is a real simple matter. Missouri has a law whereby even if you've exhausted all of your appeals, if you can prove, especially through like Newfound Evidence, that you are innocent, okay? Not, like I said, not technicalities from your trial, like, oh my gosh, my attorney forgot to object to this, or he shouldn't have objected to this and he did. No. You're sitting in jail, all those things are behind you, and suddenly there's newfound evidence. And I know that part of the story here was that this man was convicted on the testimony primarily of two eyewitnesses. And both of them were younger. They were kids who saw this. And by kids, they may have been teenagers, but the point is that they were younger. And one of them later said, the reason I testified against this guy is I thought he was a member of a rival gang. So he had a weird reason for doing it. But now as an adult, he's saying, look, I lied. I lied. It's hard to get someone to admit that. I know a lot of people go, oh, come on, it can't be that hard. Oh, no, you understand that sitting in court and raising your hand and going, yeah, I committed perjury. It's not as often that happens as you might think. But again, if you're sitting here as a prosecutor, keep in mind that your job as a prosecutor is not to convict people. Contrary to anything any hosts on television tell you. I'm looking at you, Nancy Grace. Your job is not to convict people. Your job is to have the law enforced, and if people deserve it, to convict them. But we've heard of stories where prosecutors and the police have gone a little bit too far in their zealousness of chasing somebody. Or is it zeal? Is it simply zeal? They have too much zeal. They're overzealous. And they sometimes cross the line. And so I don't know if there's any indication back in the day, 30 some odd years ago, that these two eyewitnesses were lying. I don't know if they knew that or not. But the prosecutor is now saying, hey, now that we know this, and keep in mind the prosecutor is an office, it's not a person in this sense, because over the decades the prosecutor would change. But whoever is in charge of that office gets to make that call on behalf of the people. So the prosecution apparently hung quite heavily on the testimony of two witnesses. And I just double checked here. One was 14 years old and one was 12 years old at the time of the crime. In a recorded interview played at the hearing, one of the witnesses said he lied because he thought that the defendant was affiliated with a rival gang. The other person's story has changed a few times over the years, and most recently has said he did not see the defendant commit the act. And so another judge had previously found this witness's testimony to be completely unreliable. And so again, at the time of the crime, one was 14 years old, one was 12 years old. And now that they are full-grown adults, they're saying, yeah. One of them is saying, yeah, I lied. The other one's testimony is all over the place. So now that we know this, and you can't leave this guy in jail. You just can't. And so the prosecution goes along with this process to get this guy out. And as he's being freed and headlines are being made because the guy was in prison for 3 decades plus, the AG stands up and goes, I'm going to stop this. I'm going to keep this guy in jail. But what's the excuse? And so in case you're curious, some of you have caught this. In many cases where somebody goes to court and says, I was convicted wrongly, they will throw the conviction out and retry the person. So if we can't use this evidence, we just can't use that evidence, but we'll retry the person. But that's in a typical appeal. This was a hearing to determine the man's actual innocence. So for the AG to say with a straight face that, oh, I was waiting to see if they were going to retry the man. Why would the prosecution retry the man when they just participated in a hearing that determined the man was actually innocent, and the prosecutor's gone on record saying the man is actually innocent? Obviously, that prosecutor's not going to retry him. And so the AG, I believe, to save face, went with the, on a technicality, I need to know, because obviously if you're going to give that man a new trial, you don't want to let him free because he might run away. Hold on to him for the new trial. There's not going to be a new trial. The man was found to be actually innocent. Now, some people are going to say, Steve, would it be hypothetically possible for them to retry this man? Well, the question is, has the case against him gotten any better or any worse now that the two primary witnesses against him are considered worthless? So I think that the AG was being disingenuous, and I suspect that the pundits are right when they say the AG is more concerned about an upcoming primary than anything else. But of course, we're speculating because you never know what's going on inside somebody else's mind. But as it sits right now, the man is free. He's been declared actually innocent by a court. Sadly, he spent 34 years in prison. And the woman that they talked about, the other woman who was in a similar situation a little bit earlier, I think had been in prison for over 40 years. It's unfathomable. I talk about how I've been an attorney practicing now for 33 years. This guy got locked up, I believe, a year before I became an attorney, and he just now got out. So I think about how long my career is, and it's like, oh yeah, that's how long his prison career was too. And it's just impossible to imagine. So I'm glad he's out, and I really wonder when a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old become key witnesses in an extremely serious crime, and you wonder if those kids came forward and said, yeah, we saw it, let us tell you what we know. Or did somebody go door to door, knocking on doors, asking, did anybody see anybody? Does anybody know who was there? Oh, you were there? And then drag somebody into the station, because you hear about this too, where they'll lean on somebody, figuratively speaking, and say, if you tell us what you saw, and if you saw this person shoot that person, and you testify about it, that's going to go really well for you. But if you aren't going to testify, then maybe we're going to look at some of these other things that we've heard about you doing. And I mean, I've heard of all kinds of stories. I'm not even going to go there. But I do wonder about that when the case apparently hinged on the testimony of a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old. And years later, one of them has been deemed totally unreliable, and the other one has said, yes, I lied. And I can explain why. It's not a good reason, but it's a reason nonetheless. When you're a teenager, you do stupid things. So the man's out now. The AG managed to keep him in prison for a few extra days. I don't know if it's going to help his re-election campaign or not, but we'll see. Jim Salter and Heather Hollingsworth wrote that for the Associated Press. Missouri man is free from prison after a judge overturned his 1991 conviction, despite the fact that the AG wanted to keep him in prison, but now says, it's just a technicality. I needed someone to file something saying he wasn't going to be prosecuted again. Couldn't he have simply picked up the phone and called the prosecutor and asked him? And then said, gee, just file something with the court? Because that memorandum saying that we're not going to prosecute the man would take about 20 seconds to write. And couldn't have been that big of a deal. So there you go. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. I think I might hate things now, too. So far, it's leggings as pants and pumpkin spice car fresheners.